Welcome back to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. I'm your host, Sara Payne, and I'm bringing you fascinating conversations with some of the industry's top marketing minds. Today's conversation is for CMOs and senior marketing leaders in complex B2B environments where buying cycles are long and decisions are high stakes. We'll examine a key question marketing leaders need to ask. If marketing disappeared tomorrow, would revenue actually suffer? Not activity, not awareness, not dashboards, revenue. Joining me to dig into this question is my good friend, Carrie Maurer. Carrie has spent more than 25 years as a CMO and growth leader inside exactly these kinds of organizations, partnering closely with CEOs across large enterprises, high growth companies, and startups. Today, she works directly with leadership teams as an advisor, helping them think through growth strategy, market expansion, and how marketing actually shows up as a revenue driver in increasingly complex, regulated environments. It's work that goes well beyond campaigns or messaging. It's about aligning strategy, operations, and storytelling so growth can actually happen. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sara. It's great to be here. I've long admired your show, and so it's fun to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here, Carrie. I know you've spent your career inside of organizations where that question about marketing's impact on revenue really matters. In your experiences, what is it that tells you whether marketing is actually making a difference on revenue?
I'd say, if marketing disappeared tomorrow and revenue didn't suffer, the first thing I would say, it's not a reflection of the people. It's a signal that marketing hasn't been designed fully to realize the impact where decisions are actually made. And design problems don't get fixed by marketers alone. They get fixed by leadership choices about scope and structure, priorities, operating models, and accountability. So if we think about, you know, revenue accountability and what that means, in my view, in my experience, it means owning the condition that allows decisions to move forward, both inside the buying organization, but actually inside your own company. In most B2B environments, especially when decisions involve multiple stakeholders, no single function owns momentum. It's shared across sales and product and finance and operations and marketing, and they all influence in a different way. And marketing sits at the intersection between those two systems. So when you think about the external buying organization, where decisions are being evaluated, and the internal selling organization, where strategy and proof and positioning and execution are being shaped. Revenue accountability means helping those two systems move forward together. And, from a day-to-day perspective, that responsibility shows up in really practical ways. So let me just try to put some real context around that, if I might. Say, on
Yes,
the
please.
buying side, we're going to, we are helping buyers understand the problem clearly and frame it internally. We are equipping champions with language and with proof and framing that they can use in conversations we're not even in as an organization. We are anticipating objections that will surface later across, think about legal and finance or IT or an executive review, and we're addressing them very early in the sales process. And we're ensuring that the story holds together as the decision moves from stakeholder to stakeholder. So that's from an external organization's point of view that marketing is influencing. On the selling side, so in our own organization side, we're helping sales position the solution in a way that aligns with real buyer priorities and risks. And we're bringing competitive and market insight into deal strategy, early enough that it really matters. We're aligning product and sales and leadership on a consistent narrative, so the buyer hears one story instead of several variations, depending on who might be in the room. And maybe lastly, we're identifying gaps in proof or in messaging or in experience that could stall the deal later and fixing them before they surface. And so that's where revenue or what revenue accountability, in my view, looks like in practice, not controlling the outcome of a deal, but influencing the environment in which decisions are made.
I love that. Such really great framing to start off the episode here. I think that there's so much we can unpack there
Yeah.
as we move through this conversation, but really great framing. And I think people listening to this are going to be like, dang, Carrie really gets me. Like she gets this, right? Because they might be feeling that these are design problems, as you said, very beginning of the conversation. Some of it's a result of it's not fixed necessarily by people, it's fixed by leadership decisions and systems designs. And so I think there's a lot of people that are going to be kind of taking a deep breath and kind of sitting back and going like, yes, okay, now let's talk about the
Hmm.
realities of how we get to that state. Um, on that note, and trying to make this sort of real for
Hmm.
people in this conversation, hypothetically, you walk in as a new CMO tomorrow, and your CEO, is very focused on that monthly activity reports as proof of progress coming from marketing. Walk us through a little bit of that conversation you might be having to really reframe the thinking, around revenue and decision movement and marketing's role in that.
The first thing I might do as a new CMO is certainly going to look at the metrics that we're using to assess marketing. And are we measuring for busyness, or are we really measuring for revenue momentum?
Yes.
And that's the conversation I'd want to have with my team as much as I'd want to have it with the CEO. And Because oftentimes what's really happening isn't a metrics problem, it's a measurement gap. And so our teams today measure activity because it's visible and it's controllable. So even things like, top of the funnel metrics with marketing qualified leads, or engagement rates, or downloads, or impressions, or all those things that everybody in marketing is going to be familiar with or understand. Those things signal motion, but not movement. And so internally, dashboards can light up all day long and show that sort of momentum, but externally, buyers may still be uncertain or stalled or unable to move the decision forward. And that's when you're going to see, if marketing disappeared, nothing's changing because you're not impacting that external movement that you really need. Um, and oftentimes revenue doesn't stall because marketing isn't working hard. It stalls because the work being measured isn't influencing those moments
Yes.
that actually move decisions forward, especially in the moments when buyers have to justify a decision to someone else. So I would say, I would look at certainly signals that marketing is actually helping the decision move forward. And that would look like, our buyers being asked, beginning to ask implementation, timing, or rollout questions instead of just
Mm.
product questions. If we can start to measure those things, then we know that the work that we're doing, again, collectively as an internal organization, that marketing plays an important role in, is really influencing the revenue implication downstream. Our additional stakeholders joining meetings earlier in the process rather than appearing late as blockers, because the more
Mm.
involved, the more um, signal you're getting that there's a real interest in moving forward. um, Champions begin explaining the solution internally in their own words instead of asking marketing to restate everything. So, if we're still seeing the internal champion continue to ask us, an organization, which marketing again plays a role in, to continue to restate a value proposition or restate the solution that we're bringing, they're going to have an impossible time championing that internally. And if the sales team is spending less time re-explaining fundamentals and more time planning next steps, the sales process is going to go that much faster. So I think those are practical, observable indicators that confidence and alignment are increasing, and not always the easiest to put on a, say, a digital dashboard. And those are
Yeah.
things I'd want to double click on if I'm sitting down as a new CMO. Again, whether I'm sitting with my team or I'm sitting with the CEO, and really saying, what is the impact marketing is having here, and where are we putting our time and energy?
No, those are really great examples. Thank you for, elaborating on what those helpful signals are because I mean, I took a lot of notes there. Just I think there's so much that's very telling in that about the seriousness of that customer and how close they are, right, to making a decision and what role marketing can play in helping to support that. You talked earlier about owning the conditions for growth and using that phrase. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Um, I've heard you say, in high stakes B2B decisions, buyers don't stall because they lack information. They stall because something feels unresolved to them or maybe even risky. What does that shift mean for what marketing is actually responsible for?
Um, I would say marketing, um, when you think about the discipline of marketing becoming strategic, the thing that we can do is create that discipline around sequencing. And let me try to unpack that just a little bit, because that may sound like a bunch of words, but it's really marketing's job to help decisions move forward. And to do that, we have to guide the buying process um, in a way. So the buying process itself is as important as any content or any collateral or any material that we could ever create in marketing. And sequencing isn't only about what happens inside the buying organization. Again, it's also about how the buying organization and the selling organization move together, as I mentioned earlier. So um, I think anytime a decision involves multiple stakeholders, like we often see in these complex B2B deals, um, or has real operational, financial, or reputational risk, um, the stall becomes something important, as an indicator that something hasn't been resolved yet.
Mhm.
So I think at selling teams sometimes create friction unintentionally, introducing new information too late, or responding reactively to objections, or shifting the narrative at different stakeholders engaged. And that's really when the discipline and sequencing means guiding both the systems in the right order. And, in this context, means paying attention to what the buyer needs next. And that's really the role, I think, marketing, and ensuring that selling organizations prepared to meet the need with clarity and consistency.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned earlier the internal champion, and they play a really key role in all of this, and it's a really good sign when they start to be able to represent the value proposition in their own words internally. What can marketing do better to support that internal champion through the process, right, of bringing forward a recommendation internally without overstepping sales and the role that sales plays there?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting when buyers get stuck, it's usually not because they've lost interest. In my experience, it's because they reached a point where information alone isn't enough and they need help navigating the decision. And this is where I think our B2B marketing expertise really shows up, but it's in support of that salesperson who is the interface to that champion. So, there is this old adage in enterprise technology, and I might be dating myself here, Sarah, but you don't get fired for buying IBM. And what that really reflects is that buyers gravitate towards decisions that feel credible, defensible,
Mhm.
safe, and something that they can stand behind, not just technically sound. So helping create that sense of defensibility requires more than messaging. It requires real commercial sort of fluency, if you will. And today's B2B marketer, the way that we enable that, or the way that we are, the things that we need to be skilled with in order to be fluent, and have the ability to help, you know, build that defensibility, if you will, within that key stakeholder, is pretty expansive. And so, I might go as far as saying that today's B2B marketer, in order to be effective at enabling that environment, they need to understand the product well enough to translate features into operational or financial outcomes,
Mm.
not just regurgitate features, but they have to translate that into outcomes. They need to understand the competitive landscape well enough to anticipate any comparison buyers will make internally. They need to understand the broader market forces shaping the buyer's environment so they can help frame urgency and relevance. And they need to understand how decisions are actually made inside the buying organization, how business cases are built, how risk is evaluated, how different stakeholders view the same decisions. And when marketing has that level of fluency, it becomes valuable in, I think, two ways, really. It helps the buying organization make sense of the decision, but it helps, to your point just a minute ago, the selling organization prepare for the conversation that will determine whether the decision survives. And that often means helping internal champions prepare for conversations with their internal stakeholders. And conversations marketing will never be in, of course, but can absolutely influence. And at that point, marketing isn't just communicating value, it's truly helping buyers navigate complexity and move decisions forward with confidence. And that's an important distinction.
Absolutely. And what you're describing really is a close strategic partnership between marketing and sales. And in those organizations where you have been successful in building exactly what you're talking about, I have to imagine that sales is very sort of welcoming, if you will, to the role that marketing is playing, because it is setting them up for better success in closing that deal, right? They've got a tremendous amount on their plate already, and for marketing to be able to come in with this level of sort of insight and messaging support that is sort of customized to overcoming some of these hurdles they might face. Tell me about that. I mean, is that true that when you've built this, that sales has been very, open to that partnership? And, I'm sure it depends on the personalities and folks involved, but talk about that a little bit.
I do think it really depends on the organization. I think it depends on if marketing is at the table.
It's true,
I,
true.
I think, you've raised this on a number of your prior conversations with marketing leaders, and that is getting marketing to the strategic table. And
Yeah.
it is also why we have to ensure, though, if marketing is going to be strategic, we have to, as a marketing organization, um, have the competencies that I mentioned a bit ago. And you have to, we have to certainly have top of the funnel activity and drive leads into the pipeline. But oftentimes in complex B2B, deals, in my experience, is you're not throwing a net out there and bringing leads in the door. What you're doing is you're enabling the sales organization to get out there and engage in a way that they can then begin the conversations with these prospects, or even expand the conversation with existing customers. And so if marketing is at the right table and involved early enough in these strategic processes, we can help bring, that sequencing that we just mentioned to fruition. But it's first and foremost getting your marketing leader and your marketing team at that strategic table, and that partnership between marketing, product, and the sales organization, or the growth team, depending on how you refer to it internally, all together.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you for going there, because I think a lot of different organizations and marketing leaders sort of face different realities in terms of the
Yeah,
seat at the table and,
completely.
just how the teams are structured and different personalities and leadership philosophies, et cetera.
And I hear so many, I mean, it's such an important point to make, because there's probably folks listening today who are like, oh, um, I get more requests for PowerPoint revisions or for event
Mhm.
planning or for, you know, those types of, I need more collateral. I need an asset to take with me. And those are important things for marketing to do, but that is not where, if you want your marketing organization to be a strategic partner, you've got to elevate how you engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you mentioned earlier was around sequencing, and I
Hmm.
wanna talk a little bit more about that. And this idea I know you're super passionate about is that, in B2B growth, patience can be a strategic advantage. Um, Patience is not about inaction, it's about discipline.
Hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about or unpack that and or explain what it looks like in practice?
Um, yeah, I think again, I couldn't agree more um, that the discipline and sequencing um, are critical, and especially in these complex B2B sales environments. Um, and really, how I think about it, anyhow, is um, it gets to a point actually where marketing isn't just supporting sales, it's supporting the internal seller.
Mm,
And I think when we think about sequencing and we think about the role marketing can enable, both through giving that salesperson the capability to help support that internal champion through that sequencing process, or we directly are supporting those internal champions, that becomes where we can add real value when we help buyers walk into a room with legal, finance, IT, or any executive and say, here's why this makes sense for us. Here's why now. And here's why this is the safest path forward. And when marketing helps the buying organization and the selling organization move forward in sync, decisions simply move faster and they have less friction and they have less rework and they just have less risk. And I think that's where that sequencing and understanding, that buyer, um, the process with which they have to go through is really, really important. So I'll stop there. I could keep going, but I'm going to just pause and see if that's the direction you wanted to go.
yeah, no, obviously these things take time to
Hmm.
build, right? And so there's this theme coming through, right? And we talk about not just sequencing, but the discipline. It's not urgency for urgency's sake, right? It's taking the time to slow down and build this and make sure it's sequenced correctly. And that's where then the organization is going to be able to breathe and that confidence builds because they're going to see that strategic foundation that was missing is finally there, right? And I think that's when that confidence is gonna rise pretty quickly.
I agree. And I think it's where everything ties back to the issue, when we think about, um, you know, how we have a conversation with the CEO or we think about metrics. If, you know, you know, when we think about useful signals, um, and that this is where everything ties back to where we started this conversation, or when we think about that conversation with the CEO, and how we think about the measurement or effectiveness of marketing. If marketing's job is to help decisions move forward, then marketing should measure evidence of movement, not just evidence of attention. And we certainly are so accustomed to um, clicks and downloads, and did somebody attend an event, and those are useful signals. They tell us whether something caught attention, certainly, but whether a message resonated enough for someone to take a first step is only just a tiny set of the equation. Again, valuable, but those metrics answer a different question. They tell you whether people notice something. They don't tell you whether a decision progress.
Mm,
I think
mhm.
that's the thing that really where we want our marketing organization to influence is whether a decision that a company is making internally progressed or not. And when we're talking about revenue impact, the more meaningful question becomes, did the conversation advance to a new stage? Did additional stakeholders become involved? Did key concerns become clear? Or, those are observable signals that confidence and alignment are increasing. So I think, it's that's the dynamic I think we really want to eventually have marketing get to and influence.
Yeah, I love that point so much, Carrie. And really, as I think about this whole conversation we've had today, one of my big takeaways is, when B2B marketing works, it's because it's accountable. And that accountability is to revenue, to helping those buyers feel more confident moving forward and to making those decisions easier. I think you've described that beautifully. And I want you all to know that we're going to continue this conversation with Carrie in a part 2 episode coming out in a couple of weeks, where we'll dig into why so many teams struggle to deliver on that accountability. And I'm really looking forward to that part of the conversation. Carrie, thanks so much for being here and bringing such a grounded, real world perspective to this.
My pleasure. Thanks, Sarah.
And in the meantime, Carrie, before we get to episode 2, where's the best place for listeners to connect with you?
I think LinkedIn would, be the best place and the quickest way.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Carrie. And thank you to everyone listening. If this conversation has resonated, be sure to subscribe to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. We'll see you next time.